When it comes to spending money in FM24, I struggle. You might call me frugal, thrifty, tight.
That's what she said!
Truth is, I can't keep up. In my head, 100k per week is such an absurd amount reserved for only the very, very best players. Yet according to Capology, there are 126 players in the Premier League alone reaching that threshold. I find it bewildering. So as we head into Season 4 of our Everton rebuild, let's dissect the wage budget, identify how much we should be spending in each position, and what this means for squad building. Welcome to the Moneyball Clinic, where I'll be using in-game performance data to analyse the squad, create a simple tactic, and suggest practical transfer targets. First, let's recap on the save so far. We took over a freshly relegated Everton at the end of the first season, sold almost the entire squad, only 5 players remained, and got promoted at the first attempt. Back in the Premier League, we started building. A 9th place finish secured comfortable survival and gave us a platform to start introducing our own tactical identity. We improved by 3 points the following season, which was enough to finish 6th. Now we enter Season 4 of the rebuild. We've already secured European qualification. Our goal is to do that again, cementing our position near the top of the table. Our payroll is low, the second lowest in the league. Despite a 16% wage to turnover ratio, Richard Masters will still find a way to punish us. But that is actually too low. In the last episode, we talked about how the Oakland Athletics wage budget during the Moneyball era was a third of MLB's top teams. We want to operate in a similar capacity, at a third of the lowest spending of the traditional Big Six. In this case, Man United. A third of their £202 million spend is just above £65 million per annum, and we're currently a long way short of that. I want to know how much I should be spending. It helps me understand when transfer targets are reasonable or beyond our means. It allows me to gauge whether a contract should be renewed or whether it's time to move a player on. So apologies, there's going to be a lot of maths. Firstly, I deal with wages in a weekly format, so I want to know what 65 million per year equates to. So just divide by 52 and get 1.25 million per week. Right? Well, our current spend is 871k per week, and that means we should have spent £45 million this year, but we haven't. I look back at previous years, worked out proportionately, ring-fenced money for the youth teams, and ended up at pretty much the same figure anyway. So, for the sake of ease, let's work with 1.25 million per week for the senior squad. Now the easiest way to calculate from here is to divide that amongst a 25-man squad, and just aim for an average of 50k per player per week, and that is a perfectly fine way to approach things. But this is not an egalitarian paradise. From each according to their ability, to each according to their ability. Starters and backups will earn different amounts. Different positions will command different wages. In the last episode, we took a look at the breakdown of wages by position. We can use it to inform us about rough spend by position group. I'm going to start by taking the median, as this is the lower of the two averages consistently across every position. Now, this is a bit too granular for me. We're looking for rough targets. So let's group goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards. If we were to spend the median wage on every player in the squad, that would be a total weekly spend of 2.7 million. We need to adjust this to our budget. I've rounded to the nearest 5k, which gives us 100k for goalkeepers, 385k for defenders, 390k for midfielders, and 375k for forwards. We can then divide it by the number of players for each group to get an average. You're still with me? That breaks down position groups, but now we need to talk about how we divide time between starters and backups, and this is where things can get a little woolly. I like to think of things in terms of playing time expectations, not the contract negotiation terms, but rather my personal estimation. To help explain, let's assess the squad. In goal we have Bailey Peacock Farrell and Marquarell Kayard. Peacock Farrell is the uncontested starter, likely to play 90% of games, but for the first time in his 3 years here, he's conceded more than expected. We need to decide whether he's reached his ceiling or it's just a down year. More on that a little later. Kayard has a similar output, albeit against weaker opposition, and that's fine for a backup. He will only start in occasional cup games. At centre-back, I don't like disruption. I want 2 regular starters, in our case Branthwaite and Lascelles, who will play most league games and the tougher European fixtures. Ideally they'll be rested at different times, at which point Oroz will step in. Clark Salter will be the emergency cover, only guaranteed starts in cup games. Branthwaite's tackle win rate last season is a concern, but he's our most active at winning possession. Lascelles is better in his duels, but his contract is expiring, and there are questions as to whether he is enough of an improvement on Oroz to warrant a new deal. I want our right back tucking into midfield, and I'm delighted with Sanaya's performance. Great defensively, safe and progressive in possession. Warrington looks to have found his spot as Sanaya's backup, and I would anticipate something like a 2-1 split in starts between the two. On the left, Niels Nkunku was not as creative as the season before, but he was excellent in his duels and an effective dribbler. Luke Thomas was worse in all regards, but still good enough. I would actually expect the split here to be closer to 60-40, as the role is tiring, constantly getting up and down that left flank. Our deep-lying playmaker is there to be the hub, tackle, keep the ball safe, and aid progression. Targeline was pretty solid in this regard, although I'd like to see higher possession 1 numbers. Max Christensen missed a lot of season through injury, and when he did play, he was underwhelming. Ideally, I want the starter here to play most games, so something like an 80-20 split would be appropriate. The central midfielder I see in similar regards to the left back, a player who is expected to cover a lot of ground and therefore likely to see a lot of rotation. I was happy with both our options here. Hahalou pressured and was more creative. Ellertson was better in the tackle and at winning possession. I like this dynamic. As an advanced playmaker, Alzat was disappointing. This is his worst season to date in both expected assists and goals. Like the deep-lying playmaker, I want the starter here to play around 80%, and I'm not sure Alzat is the answer going forward. JD Gessens was encouraging as the backup, but not outstanding, so I doubt he'd be the answer either. Be still my beating heart. Jakob Bruyne was a creative force on the right wing, as was Harry Wilson in relief. I'd expect a pretty even competition in this position going forwards. Which is good because the inside forward role on the other wing is pretty closed off. Ekitike played mostly as a striker due to the lapse injury, but will return to the flank next year, where he will be expected to start most games. Scott Twine played there a lot this season, and like Alzat, it's his worst season to date. Still pretty decent, and I would expect the backup to still play a decent amount here. I was very happy with the lap when he was fit. I want him to score and win his headers, which he did. I'm confident with him leading the line. Will Dixon did alright in relief, but doesn't offer the same aerial strength. I didn't show playing time percentages for the forwards because this is where my expectations are a little more complicated. Ekitike is the star player and will play on the left wing, but I'd want him to occasionally play up front. That will give Twine more minutes, or potentially see us push Bruyne out there and give Wilson more minutes. Dixon would likely get the scraps. Loosely, it might look something like this, which is a little funky as the percentages don't add up in each position, but do balance out across the whole front line. Now that's a 22-man squad, but with European football on the horizon, I want us to have depth and use the full 25-man allocation. That would include a third-choice goalkeeper, emergency cover in midfield, and an emergency forward, all who, in an ideal world with no injuries and suspensions, would play 0 minutes. We can't allocate wages on expected minutes alone because that would mean we wouldn't be paying those that don't play. We need a baseline. I keep this very simple. 20% of the wage budget is split evenly between the whole squad. 20% of 1.25 million is 250k per week, and split across 25 players, that's 10k per week each. Easy. We need to take this off the overall budget, and now we have 80k to spend on goalkeepers and around 300k each for the other units. This is where we then apply the playing time percentages to give us a guideline of how much we should spend per position, once again rounded to the nearest 5k. I cannot stress the word guideline enough. If a player is earning less, we don't need to immediately give them a new contract. But if they start demanding one, we now have an idea of where our ceiling should be. Similarly, if a player earns more, we don't need to immediately sell them, but we do need to assess where that extra money is coming from and whether we think it's worth it. Let's take a look at centre-back. Our guideline for a starter is 70k per week. Jarrad Branthwaite earns 60k per week, but with appearance bonuses included, which is what determines wage contribution against the budget, that figure is actually 73k per week. He's been at the club since he was 17, he's our captain and very much an emblematic figure in this rebuild. That overspend is justified by spending 3k below the guideline on any of the other centre-back positions. Hugo Ekitike is perhaps a little more egregious. His salary is 80k, but his wage contribution is 105k. This is 15k above the guideline of 90k for a starting forward. He is our star player, and that overspend can be absorbed elsewhere, but it is very unlikely we will ever be extending his contract. Currently, those are our only overspends. We are comfortably under in every other position, and that explains why our overall wage spend remains so far under our target. I appreciate it's a lot to wrap your head around. Ultimately, it's about give and take. If you prefer to work with the average of 50k per week, you just need to recognise that if you overspend in one place, you need to underspend elsewhere. Now we have an idea of what we can spend on wages, let's make some transfers, starting with the outgoings. The Bailey Peacock Farrell decision was made for us. AC Milan met his £20 million release clause for clubs in the Champions League. He was joined out the door by fellow first season signings Jamal Lascelles, Steven Alzate and Scott Twine. We decided against renewing Lascelles' contract, whilst Alzate and Twine were both sold for £18 million to Burnley and Leeds respectively. Jean-Eudes Ahalou, unable to get a work permit, was also released, whilst Max Christensen departed to Mainz for £5 million. We've also said goodbye to some of our young loanies. Francis Okoronkwo went to Plymouth for £3 million, Lewis Dobbin to Cardiff for £1.5 million, Jordan Hackett to MK Dons for £500,000, and Ngale Al-Macau to Millwall for £350k. In total, we've raised just shy of £66.5 million. Some of those positions, though, will be filled internally. Billy Crellin, entering the final year of his contract, was disappointing on loan. He has no long-term prospects with us, and that makes him a perfect third-choice goalkeeper. Dean Portelli's Middlesbrough spell was encouraging. He needs to improve defensively, but should be good enough to back up Targaline as a deep-lying playmaker. Remy Trafford was a player I didn't think would develop enough before this series was over. I was wrong. A sensational season at Aberdeen, and he deserves a chance to be that emergency midfielder I spoke about earlier. Ryan Tisserand and Stan Mills both had solid, if unspectacular, loan spells. I'm not certain which would be considered the fourth choice winger and which the emergency backup, but they will be given the opportunity to fight for their place. Finally, Youssef Remiti. He barely played for Rayo Vallecano, so he has once again gone out on loan, this time to Huddersfield. He's been joined in the Championship by Dixon, who's been loaned out to Sheffield Wednesday. That means we've retained 4 players who are homegrown at the club, the minimum required for the Europa League: Warrington, Portelli, Trafford and Mills. Branthwaite joined Everton aged 17, but loans to Blackburn and PSV means he doesn't meet the criteria. I do, however, feel he embodies the soul of Everton. Crellin, Clark-Salter, Thomas, Wilson and Delap also count as homegrown in England, so we're covered for registration, but I do want to be mindful of this as we hit the transfer market. So I'm looking for a starting goalkeeper, a starting centre-back, a starting advanced playmaker, a central midfielder to compete with Elliotson, and a backup striker. Again, in the last episode we looked at average transfer values in the Premier League, and we'll use these as our guidelines for maximum spend. Let's start with the backup. Miles Lieburn is an odd case, prolific in limited minutes in the Championship, but a backup. We have to go back a couple of seasons to find him regularly starting, still in the Championship, and he was prolific then too, and effective in the air. English tax means he'll cost us 8.25 million, and his 30.5k per week wage package puts him £500 over our target. That's fine. For central midfield, let me introduce Joel Emmanuel Koulibaly. He's been tearing it up in Ligue 2 on loan at Paris FC. His possession loss numbers are a little high, but also understandable given how much he is on the ball. At 5.25 million, he's a great prospect who can contribute right away, and his 26.5k per week wage commitment is very nice. Now for the starters. Kevin Meir might have just had the best goalkeeping season I've seen in the top 5 leagues. 1.12 xG faced per 90. Only 0.81 conceded, all whilst being an exceptional sweeper too. 9.25 million is less than half what we sold Peacock Farrell for, and his 70k per week wage commitment comes in under budget. Dean Howson barely played for AC Milan, but just as with Lieburn, we've gone back in time. The season before he was on loan at Stoke, where he was fantastic. I really like a centre-back who is comfortable on the ball with low possession loss numbers, and Howson fits the bill whilst also being excellent in his duels. 10.25 million is a lot, but also comfortably under our target, as is his 54k per week wage package. Finally, Aymar. He's had a down season with just 16 goal contributions, as Osasuna were relegated from La Liga. The season before was better, as was the one before that. 59 goal contributions across 3 seasons in a top 5 league is pretty damn good for a player who will cost just £12 million. His 87k per week wage commitment just sneaks below our target of 95k per week. That's 5 arrivals for £45.5 million. By far our biggest spend of the save so far, but also to be expected as we look to compete towards the top end of the table. We've still turned a profit of just over £20 million. Now we haven't quite hit our wage target, but we have finally breached the £1 million per week mark. Just. All that's left to do is play the game. Same rules as always. For the second time in 3 seasons, we opened against Newcastle, where Bruno's brain fart gifted us the win. Man City were less gracious though, Ruben Dias netting a late equaliser before Chelsea extended their unbeaten run against us with a Lukaku penalty. Another bogey team next, but Hugo Ekitike, then Liam Delap, put an end to a 6-game losing streak against Arsenal. An 11-game unbeaten streak followed. Wins against Palace, Forest, Leicester, Brighton, Burnley, Norwich and Villa, spoiled only by draws at Wolves, West Ham and Bournemouth. The injuries, however, were piling up. Delap broke his leg, Wilson's hip gave way. Aymar, Trafford, Branthwaite, Nkunku, Mills, Portelli and Ellertson all had extended absences. Our run came to an end at the feet of a former friend, as Dominic Calvert-Lewin secured a Man United win, before Arsenal exacted revenge with a 2-0 win at the Emirates. The most important game, however, is home against Liverpool. Meir's 89th minute heroics should have been the headline. Trafford's 94th minute winner was. At the halfway stage we sat third, 7 points adrift of top spot, squeezed in a tight race for the Champions League. Despite being the 3rd highest scoring team, none of our players were in contention for the Golden Boot. Delap's injury necessitated reinforcements. Enter Yohan Boni. The Parma striker does the things we want, goals and headers, and his £11.25 million release clause is more than palatable. 65k per week is within the budget for a starting striker, but will give us some decisions to make later down the line. 2 goals on his full debut means I don't need to worry about that for now. In fact, it was followed by a late winner against Leeds, and an equaliser against West Ham set the stage for Aymar to keep up our momentum, only for Forest to bring that screeching to a halt. Next up, the League Cup final. Last season we were runners-up to Liverpool, This time Tottenham stood in our way, somewhat meekly. Ekitike's 8-minute goal was enough to secure our first trophy of the save. Broim got the assist, but was later injured in the game, and that was the catalyst for the next crisis. Nkunku, Aymar, Broim again, Mills, Bonny, Nkunku again, Sanaya, Broim a third time, and Gessens all faced multi-week layoffs. We'd eased into the knockout rounds of the Europa League, where Tisserand helped us dispatch Rennes. Ekitike scored in both legs of the quarter-final as we demolished Nice. Just Bayer Leverkusen stood between us and the final, but that's quite an obstacle. Damn you, Victor Boniface. That came on the heels of Amari Kellerman's 96th minute wonder goal winner for Aston Villa. Cody Gakpo secured a 2-0 win for Liverpool at Anfield. After 5 games without a win, Ekitike stepped up to the plate. An assist for Delap was followed by a thumping header that secured a win in the penultimate game. We sat in 4th, 2 points behind Man City, 1 behind Liverpool, who faced off against league leaders Arsenal. Just goal difference separated us and Chelsea. 0-0 at Anfield meant a win would secure us 3rd. Man City, with a chance to win the title themselves, fell to Alexander Isak's 11th minute goal. 2nd was in our sights. Tottenham had other plans though. Romero opened the scoring in the 6th minute. Yusuf Özil scored his first goal of the season with his weaker foot. When Hugo Ekitike scored in the 57th minute, the comeback was on. Or not. Attention to Craven Cottage. Chelsea need just 1 point to knock us out of the Champions League. A 72nd minute Nkunku penalty confidently dispatched. Heartbreak for Everton. It's what I would have said if Trubin hadn't punched a cross into the path of Alex Iwobi, or Levi Colwill didn't turn a cross haplessly into his own net much earlier in the game. We cling on. Just. We scored the 2nd most goals, conceded the 4th least, but XG suggests we were perhaps a little lucky. Were we? Kevin Meir was signed because of his excellent XGP, and his output was almost identical for us as to what we saw at Rennes. Aymar was brought in for his consistent impact in the final third, and so his performance doesn't come as a surprise. Delap outscored his XG, Leyburn outscored his XG, Bonny outscored his XG. It's what they did before we bought them. Howson was signed to win his duels and not lose possession. Branthwaite returned to the form we'd seen in the first 2 seasons. You might conclude from that it's not luck, but it is. We've tried to maximise our chances of outperforming expectations, but the margins are fine. We have a Levi Colwill own goal to thank for us being in the Champions League, and that's not in our control. What we can say though is that we've improved. We deserve to be considered amongst the very best teams in the Premier League. And next season, our final episode, we should be asking whether we can win the whole damn thing. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like or maybe even subscribing. And if you want to support the channel further, you can join these wonderful folk currently adorning your screen, either as a YouTube member or as a patron. Link in the description below.